Let us welcome our TSN NHL insider for Tuesday morning. We say hello and good morning to Frankie Corrado. How you doing this morning, Frankie?
I'm all good. What's going on?
Well, we are. You've been retired now for a couple of years, so I'm sure you don't miss training camp and the eve of training camp. What would a typical player feel like? Let's not say superstar, but a guy who's going to be battling for an NHL job. What sort of nerves are you battling as you're getting set to open your training camp? Typically,
You know what? It's such a roller coaster, right? Because at the same time, you're happy training camp starting, like hockey starting. You have a job this year. You're going to see all your guys again, that you haven't seen all summer. You've been texting with. So there's that aspect that's great, and you're back in your routine. And I guess if you're a bubble guy, there is a certain stress that knowing that out of this next 3 weeks, you'll have a general sense or an idea of what your next 9 months is going to look like. And a lot of that, some of it's predetermined based on salary cap and where the team is at. But there's always an opportunity to kind of lay the foundation here for who's going to be the first call up, and how much do they trust you in the organization? What's your contract status? So I think it's a little bit stressful, but there's a lot of opportunity that comes with this time of year. And quite honestly, if you were one of those guys who really took your summer seriously and you felt like you prepared yourself as best as you possibly could, you could get a jump on guys. Like there's a little bit of like a feeling out process for some guys where, like everyone works really hard in the summer, but if you could be sharp early, you feel like you had a little bit of an advantage. But that always kind of gets going once the fitness testing and the skate test and all that stuff is done and you get through it. Then you're like, okay, like now how sharp, how focused can I be for the duration of this thing?
What's the pressure point like this week for guys that don't have deals yet? Like Jack Roslovic had 22 goals last season. It's Monday. Camp opens this week. He doesn't have a contract somewhere. And then, the RFAs, we're still waiting on Mason McTavish and Luke Hughes.
So this is definitely a pressure point for the RFAs. Like no one wants to be missing camp. For a guy like Jack Roslovic, who was a UFA, I kind of wonder if there was some numbers thrown around earlier in the summer that maybe you turn down. You say, I had 22 goals last year. Like I'm holding out for more. Like this is my time to kind of cash in and take advantage. And then it just doesn't even really materialize. Like it was the quietest summer that we could remember. And now we're sitting here and training camp starting and it's like, well, where are you? And so like that, I don't know, that's one of those things where you have to understand the market a little bit and realize like you did it once. Maybe you don't have everyone fooled that you can do it time and time again. This is not the, like, as far as the RFAs go, I find this to be a pressure point, but not the pressure point. Like, realistically, first day of camp, you want to be there, but you still have a pretty good runway where, you're probably not going to play every preseason game anyways. So you let a couple go by, and eventually everyone will kind of come to the table here and should anyway say, this is going to be the best we're going to do. Like, are we going to make this deal? And if that doesn't materialize with a deal, then I think the next pressure point is going to be start of the regular season. And then as we get going, like that December 1st cutoff, it can sneak up on you. So this is like one of 3 or 4 pressure points, I would say, for the RFA guys. And the one that I find, I guess, the most fascinating is not the Hughes one in New Jersey. I feel like that one would get done, but the McTavish one in Anaheim with Verbeek, like it wasn't that long ago. Was it Jamie Drysdale was practicing with Ryerson here in Toronto because they couldn't get the deal done. And then once the number came in, like it wasn't an overwhelming number, but I mean, Pat Verbeek will be very staunch in what he believes is the right number for McTavish. And it'll be interesting to see how much he's willing to move up his number to make that deal happen.
yeah, he's McTavish, a local guy. I've seen him around town a couple of times. Not recently, but I don't know if he's here or he's gone to Anaheim or what's going on right now. But if you think about the last 2 young guys that have had elongated contract issues in Anaheim, and you brought up Drysdale, but Trevor Zegras was the same, right? They both eventually got traded, not that much
Yeah.
longer. Like if you're Mason McTavish, you start like I don't know how you feel about Anaheim. I'm assuming he's pretty happy there. It's a good young team and everything like that. But is that sort of part of your thinking as well? Is the last two guys kind of in my situation both ended up getting dealt not that long after?
Yeah. Oh, you would look at that for sure. And I think from the player's point of view, for Mason McTavish especially, you look around the league and you see 22-year-olds who come off their entry-level deals and basically just sign their tickets, right? Like you guys saw it in Ottawa. Guys came off their entry levels and they got their security for a long time. And McTavish probably looks at it and says, well, I've pretty much done everything you guys want me to do. Like I've played a lot of games. My points have gone up every single year. Last year I was a 20-goal scorer. And I've done it on a team where it hasn't necessarily been a good team, also hasn't been a well-coached team, right? Like now you have a chance to put him with a coach like Joel Quenneville and see if you can get even more out of him. And you're like, well, what's the holdup? And then if you kind of look at Anaheim's cap structure, it's interesting. They have a lot of money to play with. Like they have $20 million in cap space. But Pat Verbeek probably looks at it and says, just because I have all that money doesn't mean I'm going to start, spending more than I want to. And Troy Terry's the guy that makes $7 million. Jacob Trouba, a guy they traded for, makes $8 million. Like all the guys that are like Anaheim guys there are all making under Troy Terry's $7 million. So if you're Mason McTavish, you're looking at it saying, well, are you ever going to spend money on like one of us? One of like your Anaheim guys that, draft, develop, are supposed to be like the cornerstone guys of your franchise. Like I think there would be a ton of frustration on the side of Mason McTavish from looking externally at his peers and then internally and being like, well, I don't know. Like if you guys got to figure out if you want to be good and make an investment in the players or if you just want to pinch pennies the whole time.
So since we spoke last week, Frankie, we got the official word from the NHL and the PA that the 5 acquitted players from the Hockey Canada incident in London in 2018, we know that they're eligible to play December 1st. They can sign October 15th. Let's start with Carter Hart. So Philadelphia flips out Fedotov to Columbus. Do you think the Flyers will be looking at bringing Carter Hart back? And I guess the rider to this whole question is whoever goes first. Right? Like that's going to be scrutinized the most. Do you have a feel on which player would sign first anywhere in the NHL?
I think the guy that signs first is going to be Carter Hart because he's the one that can make most of a difference to a team. You don't have to explain the Carter Hart one to anyone. He was one of the best goalies in the NHL when he was playing. He was carrying a Philadelphia team to a playoff spot a couple of years back when they had no business being in the playoffs. Of course, they fell off quite drastically after, and Sam Ersson had to play a ton of those games, and he wasn't really supposed to be playing, but he'll be the first one to cross the finish line, I would think. Now, as far as like Philadelphia's interest, I'm sure they would have interest. Like there's familiarity there. They went out and they signed Dan Vladar from Calgary, who's not a starter. Sam Ersson's a really good goalie, but they moved on from Fedotov because their crease was kind of full already. Now, you bring in Carter Hart, he's instantly your starter, and he's your number one guy, and everything's just back to business as usual. But I think if you're Carter Hart, this is your opportunity to look at it and say, who would be interested in me that has a chance to win a Stanley Cup, like very soon? Not put yourself back into the same situation Philly was in, where they're clearly rebuilding and not, not a team that's on the precipice of winning right now. I think like there's a couple teams that stand out, like the Edmonton Oilers. People, draw conclusions there. But what about the Carolina Hurricanes? It's always with Carolina. They get into the playoffs, and then we have the conversation around goaltending because maybe Freddie Anderson might not be available, and Pyotr Kochetkov is kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde goalie. Like that's a move, and you could probably do it fairly cheap, I would think. That's a move that really solidifies a position that would be like the last piece of the puzzle for me when it comes to Carolina, and it would be one less worry for them come playoff time. So that's a team that I think makes a lot of sense for him. Of course, Edmonton. I do wonder about this Utah team that's tucked away, right? Like how much market play is Carter Hart getting in Utah when they've got Karel Vejmelka, who Karel Vejmelka had his struggles last year. Ingram just got cleared to come back. Vitek Vanacek is clearly a backup at this point. And they're a team that wants to, push for a playoff spot. So that's one that makes sense. But I mean, I think like Carter Hart has to be able to get back to the game he was playing a couple of years ago, which is not going to be something that I don't think materializes right away, but eventually, it's in there. It's just, it's been a while since he played as well. So I wouldn't count on him just stepping in and being the guy that was carrying a Philadelphia team that had no business winning games. But at some point, he should be able to get, some kind of semblance of that.
There certainly was a lot of scrutiny over the charges and the subsequent trial. So without a doubt, it would be highly scrutinized if any or all of the five of these guys signed with a Canadian franchise. Do you think, given their druthers, they would rather sign in the United States, where I think this story got a lot less play, and probably in a lot of markets where hockey is not number one, the story would come and go relatively quickly?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think that a good example of that is Dylan Dubé. Like I saw, Dregs was talking on the radio here in Toronto. I think it was yesterday about, would Toronto have interest in a guy like Dylan Dubé? And, because there's a relationship there with Brad Treliving. And if you look at his numbers over the last couple of years, so last year he plays in the KHL, he's got 4 goals, he's got 11 points in 42 games. And then the year before, he's got 3 goals in 43 games with Calgary. Prior to that, he's, knocking on the door of being a 20-goal scorer and potentially a 50-point player. I wonder what changed between 2022 and 2023.
Right.
What changed? Knowing that this, pending court case was looming. And like trying to have, I guess what I'm saying is the effect of having to deal with all of this clearly hampered his play for the last 2 years. So if you are picking a team, and if you could go to the Utahs or the Carolinas of the world and not have to have this story front and center for who knows how long, like the news cycle lasts these days, but it's shorter than it used to be. But if you could avoid it and minimize it, all of a sudden maybe you get back to that 18-goal, 45-point player, more than you're like the 3-goal guy. Right. And I think you're better off doing that in a quieter American market and not being in a Canadian market where obviously this is going to get a lot of play, not just from us. This is where the CBCs and the Globals and everyone who doesn't necessarily cover hockey on a day-to-day basis, they're going to be down there with their boom microphones as well for a little bit.
So when you played, Frankie, how many training camps in your career did you go to a camp and you were gone away from that home city for a lengthy time? And I'm going to Ottawa here. So camp begins midweek. They're going to play the Leafs on Sunday. Then after that, they're on the road and they're gone. They're going to go to Quebec City for a while. They're going to even play a game in St. Louis. And a big chunk of camp is going to be away from Ottawa. Did you ever experience that? And if you did you like it? How did you feel about it?
I absolutely did. It's funny you asked that. So the camp, it was Marner and Matthews, not Marner's first camp, but Matthews' first camp. So 2016, 2017. We went out to Halifax for camp. Then at the conclusion of camp, we played a preseason game. I believe it was against the Sens out there. And then the way my games rolled out, it was like play a game in Halifax, come back to Toronto for a practice. Then we went out to Saskatoon for a game, played a game out there, came back to Toronto for a couple practices. Then my next preseason game was in Buffalo, so played that one. And then a couple practices again. And then my last preseason game was in Hamilton. and then the season was starting in a few days after that. So it was, there were games in Toronto. I just wasn't playing them. I didn't mind it. Like, I didn't mind just kind of getting out, and being with the guys. Like, we had the travel getting out to Halifax. So you're with guys on the road, and then the Saskatoon one, we're there the night before. So it just feels like a regular season game where, you're not in preseason. Oftentimes you fly the day of, and, it's nice to kind of have just camps over here while we're doing our thing over there, and we're kind of acting like it's a game, just like the regular season. And I didn't mind it. It didn't really bug me. But keep in mind, like, I was not married with kids at the time. Like, I was just me with me, basically. So it's nice to be able to juggle both family and playing in camp. But I kind of liked, just being away with the guys at that point in the year. You get to know everyone. You have some dinners with some people that maybe you wouldn't have before. And I like the training camp where you go and you kind of get away from everything.
Maybe it was bored sports writers. Maybe it was what his agent kind of had to say when he alluded to talking about Sidney Crosby's future, what it might be. But Crosby felt the need yesterday to speak up and say, I love Pittsburgh. I want to stay in Pittsburgh. This is where I want to play. To Sidney Crosby, whenever he does decide to shut it down, if it's in 2 years or beyond that, do you think he ends up going wire to wire now with the Penguins?
I mean, that was always my thought, even, a couple of years ago when Pittsburgh really fell off. Like, it just kind of felt like the Penguins, the organization, the city, like, it just kind of felt like it meant too much for him to go and throw on a Colorado jersey or a New York jersey. And I think what Mario did for him, like, he, in a perfect world, would like to do that for the organization and for someone else, mentor, play a couple years, kind of pass the torch, and, leave it on the up and up. You might not leave it better than how you found it, although didn't find it in a great spot. But, 3 Stanley Cups later, I'm sure he would want to, leave it in a position where it feels like they're back to the playoffs sooner rather than later. And I mean, last year probably wasn't the year, if you look at who got drafted, to really say that, like, that's, a franchise changing guy. But this year with Gavin McKenna, if the Pittsburgh Penguins were bad enough to land him, and Sidney Crosby not slowing down, like, what is he? He's 38, but he doesn't seem like a normal 38-year-old. He's probably got a few more years of high quality hockey left. I mean, if he could shape Gavin McKenna into the next face of the franchise and leave Pittsburgh kind of trending upward, I think that's something that would mean a lot to his legacy, more than, leaving and going somewhere else and chasing another cup. And yeah, you're playing in the playoffs somewhere else, but there's no guarantee you're going to win. I guess, you never know what happens there. There's an ownership change. There's obviously been coaching change, now GMs. Like, it's a very different organization now than when they were winning their Stanley Cups. But that was my thinking at the time. And I still think it goes that way, but I don't think the door is completely shut. I don't think it's completely shut on him moving somewhere else, especially just because the one team, that was like his team growing up, and it would have quite a bit of significance if he were to go there. Montreal should be a pretty exciting team this coming year and in the years to come, but that's really the only one that I can see it making sense. I think other than that, he's staying in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Habs fans have been, daring to dream when the Crosby talk starts to percolate. Last one, speaking of Montreal, so the brass says, and you do a lot of Habs games, Frankie, there's a plan in place to get Doc ready for the regular season. He's coming off his second knee surgery here. They need a second-line center, right? They're in the market for one, and I guess they hope maybe can Doc be that guy? If he's not, is it imperative at some point early in the season they still look for a center?
See, now I think it's more about a fit. Like, Kirby Dach could be a second-line center if he stays healthy and everything goes well, but is he the right fit for the Montreal Canadiens to be their second-line center? And that's where my question is, because with the way the team lines up now, it's like Suzuki, Dach, Newhook, Evans. Now, Newhook's a left-handed shot, but he's not great in the face-off dot. Like, he's like a career 43%, I want to say. And all the other guys are righties. They need a left-handed centerman who can win face-offs. That's what Christian Dvorak did for them, and he did it quite effectively and in a lot of key situations. And they don't have that now. So even if they did go and get a second-line center, doesn't mean Kirby Dach has to play the wing. He could be your third-line center. Alex Newhook could play the wing. Like there's some moving parts there. But with Dach, he's got a lot of skill. When he really digs in, like you can tell when he's dug in. Stops on pucks, has a little bit of jam, like throws some hits. At one point, he was up there like in hits for the team, like top 2 or 3 for quite a bit of last year. Like that wasn't an issue, but because he's had the knee surgeries now, like he's lost a step. He's not as explosive. And he's always working to kind of catch up instead of trying to get ahead, and that's been an issue. So he has to stay healthy, and if he stays healthy, we can see if he can progress and get on track to where he's supposed to be. But I think it's a longer road for him to be the Montreal Canadiens second line center now than it has been at any other point, based on his injury status and based on how good the team is now and where they're trying to go, and he's got to catch up to that. But I think the biggest thing for me is the fit. They need someone left-handed, and they need someone who can win faceoffs. And right now, the 2 guys that can win faceoffs on that team, they're both right-handed. So there's a bit of a fit logistics issue down the middle of the ice.
All right. Well, we'll see itself all start to play itself out starting this weekend. Preseason games start on Saturday, and Sens will play on Sunday. And then next week we're back to normal with Wednesday, Friday for you. You all set?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Can't wait.
You doing preseason games this year or what?
Yeah, I'll be in Montreal for the Pittsburgh and the Philly game, and then back for the regular season.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the rest of the week, and look forward to chatting with you again next Wednesday, I guess it is.
Okay, boys. Have a good one.